to Emmett, the show that pulls no punches, that isn't fair or balanced, that certainly isn't PC, the show that will explore the truth, that will endeavor, that will question, where we'll learn and discover new and yet undiscovered accolades within ourselves, as individuals, as humanity at large, our universe, our relationship with all elements, with greater understanding of the universe, where we are able to freely think and free to express, and most important, free to question, because this is where the truth is our mirror. Again, welcome to Emmett, and thank you for listening. It's March 1st, 2016, and speaking of Tuesday today, it is Super Tuesday as I record this show, and many have voted or are voting as I speak. Now first, a little bit about myself. I am a student and teacher in spirituality and metaphysics, including Kabbalah, for some 30 plus years. I have worked in politics as a campaign manager and a speaker at events. I've often even written in several journals and newspapers, opinion sections, op-eds. I've studied and I'm very well versed in the daily aspects within Middle East history, as well as its dynamics of today for some 30 plus years. And having lived in that area for some 7 years, most of which were in the 80s. I'm also the former host of the international show When Pigs Fly on BBS Radio. I had my show for about approximately 7 years. I'm also a published author of 3 novels, one of which, my first, published When the Angels Have Risen. It was written back in 2000. It was a controversial book, being that many aspects, though it was written in 2000, have come true, like mentioning the fall of the Twin Towers, the Great Recession that we had. Now, about When the Angels Have Risen, basically it was about a man who mysteriously gets picked up by extraterrestrials, aliens, only to find the truth about the biblical events and how they interacted, and the events to follow. And upon his return, he explains his new phenomena that he has discovered, and riots and massive uprisings break out, which leads to a civil war in the United States. And then my second book, The Heretic, which is a sequel of When the Angels Have Risen, with the same man who finds out his past life during Alexander the Great, who was mysteriously removed from Alexander's journals. And yet, he was the very one who inspired Alexander the Great. He was known as a great warrior during his time, and though he was also known to his enemies as a decapitator, and the Greeks, like Aristotle, referred to him as the heretic, to his lovers, well, I guess you'll just have to read about it. It's very accurate in far as historical events and very well played. My third book, Spirit, is an intriguing mystical adventure on the astral side with guides, spiritual guides, angels, war games, romance, all stirred in a compelling elixir. The main character, Randall Linder, is a wanted man by the New World Order, but that is the least of his problems, because after going out of body in the astral plane, he finds himself mysteriously in another's body, and this caused the paradox where surrealism meets dilemma. He finds himself in a hitman's body and has to find out why, after he's soon arrested for a murder he did not commit, and who would actually believe him. Many of this in Spirit is actually based upon in the spiritual accolades of my own experiences, particularly going out of body. So it's a must read for any of those who are very much interested in going out of body, astral projection, spirituality in all its forms, as well as archangels and angels, and of course the global political things that are all about us. Now, all of these books can be found on Amazon or Barnes Noble, but you can also directly go to AndrewIncognito.com, and that's spelled Andrew, Andrew, Incognito, INCOGNITO.com. Okay, that's AndrewIncognito.com, and for more information about my books as well as links about me can be found there as well. Of course, we'll in the future update things upon that. Now, enough about me. Now, one of the reasons why I felt compelled to start this new show is getting to the spiritual truths without all the political correctness. Now, I must upfront apologize because I am straightforward with a no-nonsense approach on every aspect, on everything that unfortunately may offend many of you. I'm hoping it won't, and I apologize, but this is not my intent. And being offensive is not my goal. Waking you up is, and seeking the truth and questioning things is my goal. And this is from whether it's from politics here in the United States or the world at large. I will question every aspect, but I will not only touch politics on future shows. I will also be touching upon everything from spirituality to metaphysics to paranormal to sciences, extraterrestrials, UFOs, and universal wisdom for the advancement and enlightenment amongst all humanity. I want, with a skeptical mind, I will inquire upon all issues like conspiracies, be they truthful or not. I will place questions, I will place my answers, and again, questions. I will place my point of view, because that is my point of view, but my sole desire is for you to simply question. So I begin for today's subject at hand, our nation's presidential elections. And I know the world is watching our election process and in its aspects in the U.S. And it is, a unique time that we live in, let me put it that way. And of course, we're in the midst of elections, and they're ongoing as far as the primary process of selecting the nominations for those outside the United States. And I'm speaking to now my fellow Americans, whether you are or have been a Democrat, Republican, or an independent. I simply don't care. This is like straight going on all areas politically within today's elections. But please note that every decision that's made by any government official will indeed affect you in one form or another. So you can't just cower down or not say anything or not question and say, "Oh, I don't have any apathetic view on it." It does affect you. If you have an apathetic view of today's politics, then don't complain when things happen. That being said, I will simply dive into the issues. Now, my last show, I focused on foreign affairs. But today, I want to now focus on the issues and basically on domestic issues and how they relate, again, to our economics as well as our national security and so on. I've been first an independent since 2010. I was a Democrat for some 40 years, and not just any Democrat. I was a RFK Democrat, John F. Kennedy Democrat. And I think if today, the way the Democratic Party is today, JFK and RFK will be rolling in their grave. In fact, I believe in all sincerity that if John F. Kennedy or Robert F. Kennedy were alive, they would consider them too conservative for the Democratic Party. Not liberal enough or not socialist. Because those two were actually anti-socialism. Being liberal is not necessarily being social, and liberal means to be open to minded. And conservative, by the way, means to be restrictive, traditional. So, without further ado, I do have to point out something I recently, while I was going my research, I was curious about aspects, like on the marijuana thing, where all the candidates, felt about legalization of marijuana and medical marijuana, and I was actually staunchly surprised. I know almost all the GOP candidates, Marco Rubio and Cruz, are totally against medical marijuana and even legalization. I find really bizarre that Hillary Clinton is sort of borderline on borderline on I apologize borderline on medical marijuana, but I also find that she's totally against legalization. Now, what's really bizarre is I find that between all the candidates, only Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, they all agree on a couple common items, which sort of surprises me. They both agree in changing the deals, and they're the only ones, by the way, wanting to seriously change the trade deals that went on previous generations, including NAFTA, with like Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and respectively Obama. And that was one. But the other one that really surprised me is how both of them actually are in the same picture when it comes to marijuana. They both agree to not only legalizing medical marijuana, which is obvious, but I was really surprised when I read the High Times article where Donald Trump supports legalization of marijuana. That baffled me, but then again, I'm not surprised. So again, that was pretty fascinating. Now, another issue, and I brought it up in my last show about being a commander-in-chief. And when you're a president of the United States, you swear an oath. Protect, the swear under the Constitution. But you also says, and the first thing even before you say that is about national security, protecting the citizens of the United States. You're going to, the general welfare of, the citizens. And that makes sense because what is first foremost responsibility of a government is protect its citizens, physical welfare of its citizens. And Trump has laid out not just by statements. You can always find somebody who's really deeply caring about the welfare of citizens by not just what they say but what actually they do. One thing was sort of surprising, and now it's not just screwing kudos for Trump, but he does things for people without saying, hey, look what I did for him or him and them. I mean, he's gone out of a way of donating money and gone to speech engagements and did things for many things. He donated his time, his money for a lot of movements, a lot of things to support care for people. He's actually gone out of his way. I mean, there's instances where he pull over and help somebody, send a helicopter. I know that he went and somebody who was ill and saved their lives. I mean, I can go on and on about the accolades of what he's done without expecting anything. He doesn't even mention it in any of his events, which is surprising. That shows me character of a person who doesn't have to broadcast his help for a fellow man. It's done by his deeds. Now, he may say certain things, but proof is in the pudding, as I say, is what a person does. And he has certainly, if you look at it, and even you can do your own research, you'll find that he's actually done a lot of amazing things with both his money, his time, and his perseverance and his energy, helping other fellow human beings, and not just the United States, but the world at large. So that tells you a lot about character, about what they care about. So when he says, I'm going to care for the welfare of American citizens, he's not pandering. He really believes, he walks the talk. And he really means it. I think that's why he gets so passionate about it. I think people pick up on that passion of his care. More so than any other candidate, I hate to say. Now, Rubio, though, I think, though, has that passion thing. And he's proven his leadership, too, as a senator. In time, I think that would be foretelling. I think he really deeply cares, and not as passionately I think as Trump, but he's there. I mean, Trump is doing this for nothing. He doesn't need to be president. He's doing it because I really feel he sincerely wants to give back. I mean, he's putting his own money, his own time. He's doing it for what he sees, what he was awarded and he had the opportunity for. And I think he's just trying in his way giving back. That is his pluralism, which I'll get into. Now, Cruz in some ways, unfortunately talks, but then doesn't walk the talk. I mean, here's a big example is over the visas. He has, on his bills, on his own actions in the Senate, allowed visas and many visas not to be properly vetted. He's even cut monies toward the vetting systems. He's also voted cutting funds toward border control, and even cut funds for our vets and cut funds for our own military. This is on record. I mean, Marco Rubio is correct when he said, Cruz, you're a liar. He is. He has not been behind the soldiers and the military like he says he is. It's all talk. And proof is in the pudding, like I said. And he hasn't been there. So if he can't stand really for the vets and wants to cut funds, I mean, the guys who fought for us, or women who stood in front of a bullet for us, whether you're for a war or not, these men and women stood in harm's way, and yet he voted to cut their funds. He voted against helping the military. This is on record. So as much as he says he's for national security, his action prove otherwise. Now when we get to Hillary Clinton, I mean, holy hell, right? Her care about national security, I mean, really, her emails is a national security risk. She actually allowed her emails to be picked up by enemy forces. Private emails that had maybe certain intelligence information, that were now subject to be utilized by states that are in our best interest, states that we consider maybe our enemy. She allowed herself to be vulnerable. And is that by ignorance? Is that by stupidity? Or is that by lack of responsibility? All three doesn't matter. That is not character of our commander-in-chief, someone who's going to care about national security. And then speaking of national security as the general welfare of human beings, of American citizenry, her own behavior in Benghazi itself showed her character and a lack of responsibility, and how she damn well didn't give one fuck about American lives. And I say that so candidly. People died in Benghazi because of Hillary Clinton. American lives. Both soldiers and citizens. So how do you think she's going to care about you? You ask any soldier that's out in the field who has been in a war, and if there's a battle going on and they have somebody surrounded, they will go out of their way to try to save them. Or there's wounded on the field, they'll try to retrieve them. That's character. That's what you're expected as a soldier, and as commander-in-chief, you are the lead soldier. But that's normal. That's human. To care about the other person. Whether he's even an American citizen, caring about saving somebody, she has no care about. Now, Bernie Sanders, oh my God, he sits on the VA chair. And look how our VA is, and look how the VA has treated our veterans. It's inept. It's irresponsible. And if you go on national security issues, he has none. He can't even talk about it. And you know what? It's really amazing. In all his years, a tenure in the Senate, he's never actually sat on any national security committee. Think about that. In fact, you want to know something? And this is a fact you can look up. He doesn't even have a national security clearance in all of the years he's been there. I mean, the threshold to get a national security clearance for a senator or a congressman isn't as high. You don't have to be like a president. I mean, they have actually more, obviously. He's not a CIA operative or FBI even, or DEA. But please, he couldn't even get. He's never had one. That shows his ineptness, his ignorance of national security, and you want him to protect you. That's like having, getting Ronald McDonald to be your policeman. Please. Now, immigration. This is where it really gets interesting because I have my thoughts on immigration, but let me first be candid about words, how they're used. When somebody crosses the border into our country, and there's a law that says you can't come and you have to go through, the process to get a visa or immigration or, right? That's by the law. When you break the law, it's considered illegal, right? You did something illegal. So when somebody crosses the border, he's or she is illegal. He is not considered undocumented. It is illegal. To use the word non-documented is ridiculous. It's absurd. Let me give you an example. Can you tell me if you were driving your car and you didn't have a driver's license and you got pulled over by a cop, and you told the cop, hey, you know what? I'm not illegal. I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm just a non-documented driver. What would happen? Exactly. That's the problem. Now, getting back to immigration of what could be done and everybody's proposals, building the wall makes sense. I mean, I would love to have borderless, everything's free borders, freely cross in and out, right? I really do believe in Einstein's approach of one day if society and humanity at large had become a euphoric, a situation where we have become civil, that we're no longer the Crips versus the Bloods versus the Crips scenario. We're not gang versus gang, enemies versus this. When we could get that around the world, if that was really true, without the New World Order approach of being servitude and slaves, a real opening, yeah, that would be great. But in reality, we have countries that have sovereignty. In this country, we have a sovereignty. In this country, we're supposed to have a border. In this country, we have to have our divine aspects. We do have our borders, and our borders are supposed to be secured. Think about if it weren't secured, you can have like what they are. We have, illegal things happening, right? Besides the illegal immigration, you can have people like from ISIS and terrorists coming across the border with impunity and just do what they want, right? You can have the cartels bringing not just drugs and stuff, but guns and whatever, human trafficking, which is another really disgusting thing. These things is why we need one major reason is borders. Security. Having laws. Now, first thing, you have a wall. Then you have real security. So, here's my proposal, and this is my idea. And you might find it very inclined to one of the candidates. My idea is giving the illegal immigrants here a 90-day window to get work permits, which should include a small penalty, because you can't force a huge penalty. That's not ridiculous. It's not $1,000 or something. Something moderate, $500, whatever. I think $400, $300, whatever. Learn English, because they gotta learn. I don't care where you're from. You need to learn English and be in America. It's normal. Things are done in English. We should have people assimilating here, not vice versa. Americans shouldn't have to be forced to assimilate to outsiders. Other people should learn to assimilate here. And of course, I love the salad approach. We are a nation of salad. We're not a melting pot. But communication is a big thing. So learning English is important, and it also helps them to grow within our society, not be locked into communities. It allows them to broaden their economics and their education. And of course, paying taxes, any small back taxes. And of course, if you're a criminal, you're gone. You're a felon, you're gone. So, and then after that 90-day window, all they have to do is register, because there's a bureaucratical process, I would think, normally. But after that 90 days, that's 3 months. If you can't just simply register, I don't care, you're out. No ifs, buts, or whatever. You're out of here. And this is sort of pretty close to Marco Rubio's idea, which I do agree with. So I do believe having security with a wall, at the same time we need to have registration. I personally feel you don't have to do one before the other. I think you can do them almost simultaneously. Nonetheless, I think we have a way of doing that. By the way, that paper that I mentioned, the work permit, that was actually Nixon had that back in the 70s. They had a little paper that had a little work permit. It worked. I don't know why they went away from it. You go tell me. So, and then as far as Cruz, suddenly he's a supporter of the wall only after Trump made it a big deal. Rubio was part of it because he actually had that in his deal, make a wall of security. It was part of the Gang of Eight plan. That's why I think I'm more in line when it comes to immigration, more with Marco Rubio. I think Trump has the right, but there's no way. I totally disagree, and you can't take people here and just ship them on back, except for people who break the law. I'm talking about felons who did things criminally. Those who are illegal, who broke the law, okay, we'll give them a chance to get their work permit. But no way a path to citizenship right away. They need to go back to the line, way back, very back to the line, and then try to get in there. I have no problem with anybody coming here. But at least they're here. Give them a work permit. You can't deport these people. They're citizens, I don't care where they're from. Now, as far as Hillary and Bernie, look at the Dems. They had an opportunity in 2008, or actually going in 2009, when Obama controlled. It was in the White House, right? And then you had both the Dems control both the Senate and the House, so they controlled Congress. They promised that they're going to do immigration reform, and they did absolute zero. This is typical of the Democrats. They will pander and promise all kinds of bullshit. And people, oh yes, look what they're all for us. They're like socially, and then they don't do crap. They never do. They don't give a shit. They just want to get the seat, and you're out to do. It's almost like, reminds me of the movie Bulworth. They'll tell you whatever you want, and they do what the hell they want. That's the Democrats. And as far as illegals, they have a pathway to citizenship, but they don't. What about a security? None. It's always the same old. They wouldn't do a damn thing, about the immigration. They're all talk. I mean, they haven't. Now, as far as economics, in economics, I think this is where it gets pretty interesting. I think that Ted Cruz still thinks we're in the 1980s. He thinks that's like lowering the taxes. The money will magically trickle down if you just lower taxes. He has no concept of world economics. And the same with Marco Rubio. They both think that, this old Reagan idea of trickle down, hello, we're in 2016, there's a world dynamics. There were trade deals made. There was NAFTA. There's deals made with China and Canada and everywhere. India. I mean, Southeast Asia. Come on. Europe. So, think about that. Now, mind you, they're both attorneys. And my dad, I might be generalizing. My dad once said, the worst business people are doctors and lawyers, but he said more specifically lawyers, because lawyers make a lot of money because they get paid a lot per hour, right? But when you ever say them they form a business, they totally out the door, right? I mean, no, I'm generalizing, but you'll see how there's a commonality of that, because they're really not taught to be businessmen. They're taught to argue, the debate, and then they get paid an hourly wage for it. Basically, think about it. They didn't really learn business structure, unless they're really embedded in it. So, think about the United States. We're basically a business. And I heard Trump trying to explain on Bill O'Reilly's show, and it was so funny because he didn't get it, what Trump was explaining, and I think it went a little over his head, because maybe he didn't understand economics. I think because maybe Bill O'Reilly's more of a journalist as opposed to a businessman. It takes a businessman or woman to really understand what Trump was talking about. So I'll explain it to you in really simple terms. You don't have to be a business person to understand it if you just bear with me. When you have a business, I'm going to talk about business. What do you need to do? Make profit, right? And what's the first thing you need? You need sales. You need some revenue coming in. So the first thing you do is you expand, you get those sales growing, all this money coming in. As that money is growing, at the same time, you're watching your expenses. So you expand the pie and you watch your expenses. But what do you do? How do you watch your expenses? You make things run efficient. You look for deals and things that are cheap but won't compromise the efficiency and quality of your product or service. And those are the equations. So you want things, reduce your expenses, but increase the pie. So what Trump was trying to explain, and he has said it many times, but people, it's sometimes over their heads, especially a lot of political pundits, his idea is basically increasing the pie. Even though he'll lower the taxes for the middle class and certainly for the lower class, basically a really good deal, almost Bernie-like actually. He's going to raise taxes, I know, on hedge funders, but he's going to force all outside corporations to come back into the U.S. and try to bring them in. And certainly that's been the problem. One of the biggest problems, which none of these people know how to do. He's done it. He knows how to wheel and deal. How can you force a corporation to come back? And believe me, I've been affected. I work in the film industry and FX, and I can tell you for a fact, all Sony moved out, Deluxe, I can go down the line of all the MPC. A lot of these companies, a lot of major FX houses have left LA and now in Vancouver, in Toronto, and Montreal. And of course, there's some they're in India and they're in Singapore, but they left. That's the point. Why? Incentives, taxes, problems. In California alone, they actually tax you for what they call unsecured assets. They literally tax you. If I have a computer and I have a business, they actually can tax you for that computer. That's for those outside California. So they have ridiculous taxes, and you wonder why they do things outside California and why the industries are moving out. So that's the problem. How do you bring business back in? That gives us jobs, Even small businesses are affected because small business generate income. They hire, they buy things, more products, cause a multiplier effect. So you increase the gross national product, you increase income, you increase exports, you create manufacturing, service, everything increases, thus the pie increases. You do that by incentives and dropping things down and bringing. It's very simple. How do you bring the companies back? How do you make sure industry is brought back in there and have increased revenue? That's one. Second, how do you cut down expenses? Cutting expenses in these terms are taxes. So let's say he's cut taxes on one end, but usually on what he needs to do to pay, for example, he's not going to buy a screwdriver for $100. He'll buy it for a dollar, what it's really costs. He'll make things more efficient because a business man or woman will make it more efficient because they're focused on making things efficient because it's more productive, more profit, less loss, right? That's how he would do it. It's simple. A business person would get it, right? That's the issue. So how do you generate? You generate it. You increase the pie. And that's basically Trump's plan, what he's talking about. So for those who don't know, that's why slam down, there is nobody on both sides of the aisle that has the business sense. Now, some people bring, oh, what about his bankruptcy? What about this? Listen, businesses go up and down. And there's an old saying, they say like in the Middle East, I remember it was a friend of mine said, be like a Bedouin and you'll always survive, and also in business. Meaning, Bedouins are like nomads. They adapt to their environment. So the best businesses adapt. So maybe, things were going bad in Atlantic City. You bail out. You start up. You adjust things. So the same circumstance he would do. He adjusts. It's like fluid. You adjust the circumstances of the day. And this is where like Cruz and Rubio, they're not even in the ballpark. Okay? They don't even get it. We're in a whole different era. We're today. And you have to look into the future. And Trump has obviously got it hands down in the future. As far as business oriented. And that's what our nation is. Business. We are a capitalist with minor socialist, if you want to call it. I wouldn't even want to use that word, but more of a having certain amount of regulations, but at the same time free market. That's what we're supposed to be. In certain areas, we break up our monopolies. We allow free market systems work, but at the same time, at certain points, we cap things off. Now, mind you, I will give you an example where it crashed, and people were blaming Bush, George W. For the crash, but actually it came about way before him when, ironically, there was I think it was called the Taft Act. It was the bank regulation, so banks couldn't actually be involved in securities or packaging securities or be any way form of it, and that started in the 1930s under FDR, and it was Bill Clinton had removed it with, and you can look at this with that congressman now, I forget his name now, but it was removed. Bernie. I can't. Oh well. Anyway, I forget his name. It just went my mind now because I'm doing this off the cuff of my head. Bernie Franks. That's it. Let's apologize. He was also part of that removal of the restrictions by banks. And because of that allowed them to package the mortgages and then sell them as securities, and that's what happened, okay? That's basically what happened. And then, of course, there was incentive to just make more and more BS mortgages and just sell them because nobody knew what those real mortgages were all totally BS and they were not regulated. And that all came about that came actually about in the 90s. So there again, that was a problem. We have people, which I'll get into, of money and this and that and cronyism and corruption, but that's the issue. That's where things how they are. And so basically going back to Trump with his thing, you expand the pie, but when things go on bad, it's when we had a lot of circumstances that were decisions made by people who were out for themselves, who had cronyism or corrupt. And you can go across the board. A lot of them are corrupt. In fact, most of them. Now, when you talk about equality for pay, there's another issue, and it's amazing. Talking about equal pay for a woman, for example, which is a big one. If you look at Bernie Sanders, he actually pays his women less than men on his Senate staff. That's a fact. And on the opposite end, people start attacking Trump, calling he's a misogynist, he's not anti-women or whatever. Total bullshit. Trump actually pays his woman on average higher than the average. Pretty actually equal or more so than men. Okay, he has actually more women on his management staff, and in that it also includes, by the way, minorities, Latinos, and people of color. Okay, because he looks at people not for their color of skin or their gender, but what their abilities are, because that's what he does. Your businessman, you want a person who's good. You don't care what color or what they are. Do the job. And because of that, you have a real diverse. He has a very diverse companies. All of them. You can look at them, check them out. It's fact. He has probably one of the most diverse companies in the nation, and especially on higher management. I mean, and it percolates. You can see between his own kids, his own daughter, and them. You can even see it if you want. I mean, you can sort of see it. Even how when he had the apprentice, how the people who he had on his show. But that I'm just telling that's from the outside. But in his business, he is. As far as Hillary with that, she says she's, for women's rights and all that stuff. But let me tell you how full of crap she is. Look at around the world how women are treated in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, even under the PLO, in the Palestinian Palestine area where they control with PLO or Palestinian Authority, how they actually it's okay to have honor killing, not a word. Look around the world how women are treated, and there's not one word by Hillary Clinton ever. Go to any country that's got real problems how they treat women, and she doesn't say one word. Okay, why? Think about it. Is that really somebody who's really caring about women's rights? Did she really care about women's rights when there are women who are victims to her own husband, who are actually, some think, may possibly raped or sexually attacked? There's a big question on that. So, she's not all what you think is. Now, going to healthcare. Healthcare is another real interesting issue. I mean, Obamacare, to me, it sucks. I mean, everybody thinks it sucks. Providers are getting totally screwed. A lot of providers now are actually leaving, trying to get away from insurance companies. The only one who benefited basically were insurance companies. People are paying more in premiums than ever before. I mean, they actually went up. Okay. So what was the benefit? They had pre-existing clauses. So if you have a pre-existing condition, you're taken care of, right? But that's about it. And my understanding, what I didn't understand is in 2008, and I worked for, by the way, Hillary Clinton in 2008 during the primary, and she sponsored a plan called the Public Option Plan. And let me explain it. A public option, basically, everybody had the option to go into the Senate or Congress plan. That was the option. You would become part of their pool and then get paid for the same things what they get. Because they have their big pull, and that would have been amazing. It wasn't mandatory; it was your voluntary system. And then when she didn't obviously make it in the primary, I remember Obama's campaign brought us on board with, I know me personally and several others, especially in Nevada, got us on board because he opted to promote, and that became his mandate also, the public option. Now, what happened to that? The public option plan went poof when Barack Obama had his little Cheney-like meeting with insurance companies. Oh no, we can't do that because it's going to screw the insurance companies. That showed how much he really cared, because guess what? He got some money on there, right? Took care of him. So he didn't help. He put out the Obamacare. And then it's really ironic, something happened with Hillary because she supports the same Obamacare. Oh yeah, she gets money from the pharmaceutical companies who also benefit. She gets money from the insurance company who also benefit. So guess what? Why do you think she still wants to keep the Obamacare? Because she gets money. That's the real reason. So now then you go to Sanders. Sanders is amazing. He goes out and he wants a single-pay socialist system. Sounds all nifty and really cool, but the fact is, it doesn't provide any real incentive. What would make somebody have a better health system under his proposed plan? None. There is absolutely no incentive. And this is the problem where you have places like in the UK and in Canada, and they do have problems. They have longer lines. The healthcare quality goes down the tube because of the way he's doing it. Now, the system that's more of a hybrid of both socialists and capitalists, which be to what I feel is the Israeli system. Having lived there, let me briefly explain it. It's a really good system. I don't know why they just don't do that one. It's sort of like, basically they have a small tax, not much, really, really small. It's not as big as you think, and everybody's covered under basic stuff. So if something happened to you, you're taken care of in the hospital. Doesn't matter what. If you need to see a doctor, you got to go to a doctor in the hospital. You wait in line. It's sort of like, unfortunately, it's sort of like Medicare, right? Everybody's covered, no matter what. You don't worry about it. Now, if you want to pay a little extra and go like to a clinic, then you pay a little bit more per month. Okay? So then you do that one. And then you have like, a clinic kind of thing. And that's like sort of like HMO, PPO, and they call it Lumi when I lived there. Then they have a program called, then they go on a higher tier because it's 3-tier. The higher tier would be Maccabi. This is when I lived there. It was called Maccabi. And Maccabi, you pay a little bit even more. And I know people who live in the city. I didn't live in the city then. And they would use that sometimes because then they get to have house calls, private doctors, etc., etc. So it's sort of like straight up PPO. You see whoever you want and it's taken care of. And that's their system. And then Israel has one of the best health cares in the world. I mean, believe me, I'm telling you. I had my kids, my oldest was born there, and my other two were born here. And I tell you, in a heartbeat, the Israeli healthcare is tenfold better than here. Okay, so think about it. They're doing something right, but that's it. That's their system, and they have incentive. They actually have incentive for their medical research. They're way ahead of everybody else. A lot of the stuff that you see, from CAT scans to medical, a lot of it's from there. Okay. You'd be surprised. MRIs, all from the Israel. Ultrasound. They were using ultrasound way ahead before they were using here. Eye surgery, they actually discovered it was actually during the war, and then all of a sudden they felt, we can fix your eyesight, and that became from the laser surgery actually developed in Israel. So a lot of things come from there. You'd be surprised. So that's why I feel that was a great system. So Trump, Rubio, Cruz want to do away with Obamacare. Great, I agree. But they never mention about pre-existing conditions, and that's what I question. What about pre-existing conditions, which they never meant? But Trump is right about the state competition thing, because if you look at states, I know, like, let's say Nevada, they have only like 2 or 3 companies there, and then California has, I think, a mixture of 8 approximately. I mean, they're limited. They can't really go from one state to another. They should be across the border. He's trying to drive up competition. That might be a way. But why can't we just do the public option, which would basically do the same thing? We join in the pool. It's not authoritative. It's not mandatory. It's free will. We should. That's how it should be. I don't know. That's what my thing is. And this is where I do have a little bit of a problem with the GOP, but it's also where I saw the Dems failed us. They pander and promise and don't do crap. And you think about why? Well, let me look at who owns who. The pharmaceutical companies don't have money in Hillary's campaign, Rubio's campaign, and Cruz's campaign. And so do the insurance company. They provided money to Marco Rubio, Hillary Clinton, and Cruz. Same people, you'd be surprised. This also, by the way, just let you know, the hedge funders and a lot of banks also there, okay? Especially the hedge funders. So they got their payoff, right? So they're corrupt. They're paid off. They're not gonna help. They're gonna yeah. Side, we tried. They're gonna do that. Oh, we tried. We couldn't get the other side to agree with us. You'd be surprised behind closed doors they're full of crap, okay? Now, only Trump is not owned by any of them. He don't really care. That's why he's scary. They keep, oh my God, what's he gonna do? Why? Because he's not owned? He's actually gonna do what the people want? Which brings to me somebody I didn't think about. What the people want. That's pretty scary. Now, if you read some history, you will be so surprised to read about somebody, well, let me put it this way. back in history, his name is Ted Roosevelt. And if you read about him, he was being called a racist. He was dangerous, flamboyant. Everything you hear with Trump is being called misogynist. Everything you heard about Trump, you can hear about Ted Roosevelt. So I was curious because I almost feel like, is Trump really a pluralist? Is he creating a different kind of conservative movement? Well, everybody has different kinds. And parties, by the way, evolve. I mean, the GOP before Reagan was different. I mean, they were more libertarian. They were actually pro-choice. They actually had. It was Nixon created the EPA. I mean, I go on and on. He was actually for creating. By the way, you'd be surprised. Single pay system for healthcare. That was Nixon's idea, by the way. He wanted to do that. So anyway, there was, people, they change, and you'd be surprised how it was the Republicans were actually for civil rights, and the Democrats, especially the Dixie Democrats, were against civil rights. So you can see how things change. They're not the same. And look at JFK's Democrat Party and RFK's Democrat Party today. If you looked at the party back then, they look like they would roll over their eyes saying, that they're like communists or socialists. The very thing they are fighting against, like the Soviet Union and Cuba and China and etc. So it's different. But I read, so I went and looked and I did this Google thing, and I looked up, and lo and behold, I found an article written in Forbes, and it was written by a gentleman named Theodore Roosevelt Malloch. His last name spelled by the way, Malloch. Theodore Roosevelt Malloch. And it's dated December 12th, 2015. Please Google it. You should be able to find it. And one of his opening statements, I say in quotes, by the way, the two leaders, and this he's referencing both Ted Roosevelt and Donald Trump, the two leaders have much in common, from style and swagger to substance and outlook. The last century would not have been bent along the American arc were it not for our unexpected president. This century may not go our way without the likes of a Trump. He further said, and I quote, this is from the words of Ted Roosevelt. Ted Roosevelt said, "Each of us must stand erect and should be proud that we belong not to a dozen little squabbling, contemptible commonwealths, but to the mightiest nation upon which the sun shines." Think about that. Real nationalism, real Americanism, make America great again. Sound familiar? But also calling for all Americans to cease their divisions and recognize that we have individual talents to make America great. Trump is talking like Roosevelt about everything, even his work ethics, his virtues. So is Trump's pluralism resonating? Is this a new form of what they're afraid of in the GOP? That this pluralistic conservatism, if you want to call it, is resonating throughout the country? It certainly is resonating amongst everybody, from no matter where status you are. People, whether you're very wealthy, to having a business, to even the common blue-collar worker, no matter whether you're black, white, green, yellow, purple, orange, it's simply it's hitting something. It's hitting. Why? Now listen what Ted Roosevelt said. He said, "No man should receive a dollar unless the dollar has been fairly earned." He basically says he wanted a financial system and an efficient army and a navy large enough to ensure our security and guarantee the peace. This is what basically Ted Roosevelt said, by the way. So Trump says this very same thing. And that, by the way, I was quoting out of that same journal, that two paragraphs. Ted Roosevelt was such a threat. He actually he wanted to wipe out all the cronyism and corruption within the government. I mean, that's why he wasn't liked. Think about why the media is against Trump. from every one aspect, because they're threatened. He's going to rock the world from both Democrats and Republicans because they have this game going on. They're playing the people like pawns, like sheep. And they're both afraid of it. That's why they're making up crap about him on both sides. Both sides. Ted Roosevelt was subject to the same exact thing. Read about it. And what did Ted Roosevelt? He ended cronyism. He was so prevalent that, in fact, it freaked out both parties. And so what is the difference between Trump? He demands the same. And if Trump is there, he's going to want what? Clean the house, because he's not beckoned to anybody. He's not owned by anybody. He is being a pure pluralist. Roosevelt also sought material progress and technological advancement and a nation of prosperity. Doesn't this sound like Donald Trump himself? He's pushing for our security. He's pushing for national prosperity, our material progress, technological advancement. He's looking like we're a business that's going to expand and grow. So frankly, much like Roosevelt, he could actually unite the country. He's proposing a unification. He's not seeking divide. They're throwing all these hatred. He's this, he's that. But there's not one bit of things that says, when he's talking about, hey, we have illegals, we want to send them back. He didn't say, let's bar Mexicans. We're not going to let them in there. He says stuff about the Muslims, but that was out of security. Probably correctly have said from Muslim countries, we're not going to let them in. That actually happened under, by the way, President Carter did that with Iranians when it's 1979. He stopped any Iranian, no matter what, from coming into the country. I know because my ex-wife's family actually couldn't come to this country. They were barred for a period of time because all Iranians were banned from entering into the United States, even as, visas, immigrants, or whatever. Even though they were refugees running away, the U.S. stopped them. So, was Carter being racist? No. So, I mean, say what you will. I mean, he's hitting from broad strokes, and I think that's what... and you look at who's really creating the racial divide. Think who's going to benefit from racial divide. Think about who... It's like somebody breaks something so that you need them to fix it. If your car worked perfect, would you need a mechanic? So why don't we give you a bad car that's all screwed up so then you need us to fix it? Or purposely sabotage it, or create the divide so that they say, hey, see, you need us because we're going to help you. And who's really created the division? Look, you talk about where people of color, how they are 8 years ago until now with Obama. Look at the unemployment. They're double amongst African Americans. The unemployment. Talk about racial divide. We have never seen racial divide in 8, 10, 15 years like this. I mean, I've never heard this. Obama, Bush Jr., Clinton, and now Hillary. You've never heard this division. It's worse now. Under what? A Democrat. Think about when these things happened, the riots. Was there riots, racial riots under Reagan's era? Nope. It was under Clinton's era. I was there. Remember Rodney King, blah, blah, blah. There are a bunch of riots that happened all across the border. Detroit, a couple others, aforementioned. All stuff happened during the Clinton administration. We had the same thing during Obama. During Bush administration, we didn't have that. So was there that kind of racial divide? No. But they want to paint it that way. They're always calling Republicans racist, but who's the racist? I look at who... Did you see a diversity amongst the candidates, amongst the Democrats? No. You saw diversity. You had a African American. You have 2 Latinos. You had a woman also. Okay, well, you have Bernie who's Jewish. Okay, I'll give you that. That's it. They didn't have any diversity. So who's calling who? But look how the nation divide. But look how things and who's wants to keep creating that. So I'll ask you this. Look who's really walking the talk. Don't just listen to the talk. I hear people always bop, 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 talking crap. I cut through all that crap. I watched all the news. I watched CNN, MSNBC, Fox, all of them. You know, I read both sides, every side, because I look at them as ad campaigns. I try to find out what they're trying to sell you, and then you can, if you think about what they're trying to sell you, then you got it. You know, they're trying to divide you, get you up things, because that's what keeps them going. Entertainment, division. And then you look on the opposite, and who really walks the talk? Who actually does it? Who's it? And I think people are getting it. Is that why people are doing it? I want you to do the comparison. Compare Trump. Could he be the next Ted Roosevelt? Is he changing the dynamics of politics within the GOP specifically? Is it going to turn from the neocon conservative to a pluralist conservatism of Ted Roosevelt's day? Think about it. I want you to decide, and you to decide only. It's between you, not me, not anybody else, not your neighbor, not your cousin. Think for yourself. I want you to remember also that we're not really any color. We're not black or white. We're not any race. It's not our color skin that makes us. We're not a tribal mentality. You can choose that. These are masks around us. We are who we are. We're physically just all we are basically is soul spirits that actually have a human spirit. We're not humans that have a human experience with a soul. We're the opposite. We're spirits that happen to have a human experience. Think about that. A soul doesn't have a gender. It doesn't have a race. The soul doesn't have any of that. It doesn't have a penis. It doesn't have a color. The soul doesn't have a mask. It doesn't have any of those. That's the reality. We're just energy. And in reality, we're simply connected to each other. We're connected to each other on this tree of life. We're simply souls that are leaves with different views on this tree. And yet we're like all connected to these branches, the same branches. In fact, to the same tree. And that same trunk of that tree is Mother Earth, with all animals, all species, every single thing on this physical sphere that we're rotating on, with all the water and every air and everything else on that physical side. And yet we're rooted into the infinite universe with beyond all the multiple dimensions that sustains us within infinity. That is our reality. So until next time, I want to thank you all, and God bless you all, and thank you once again. God bless.